This film is the fourth of a series on British liners, the earlier film being of the Cunard Line, Orient Line and P&O Line. The film is made up of the best of the film I have on the Union Castle liners. The line was formed in February 1900 by an amalgamation of the Union Steamship Company Limited with the Castle Mail Packet Company Limited. By the beginning of the post-war period in 1945, the line was the second largest British passenger ship line. In this film we see some of the liners which plied their trade between England and South African ports and also around Africa via the Suez Canal. Most of the film was taken in the early 50s, up to the time when the service was withdrawn in 1977. I start with a series of stills all taken by Chris Rabone, a member of the purser's staff. Chris and his wife Alison, who was also at sea and who was related to me by marriage, have both since died, and I dedicate this film to their memory. The stills form the introduction, the remainder being old cine film converted to DVD, most of which is in colour and filmed post-war, although there is a little pre-war film in black and white. It includes all of the post-war mail liners which operated between Southampton and South African ports, two of which were later transferred to South African Marine Corps. Both of these ships are shown in their new colours. Also included are some of the Round Africa service ships that sailed from London, sometimes via the west coast and home via Suez, and others out via the Suez Canal and homeward via the west coast of Africa. I have also included a few of the fast cargo liners at the end of the film. These were chiefly engaged in the company's South and East Africa service. I have to warn you that the quality of the film varies, sometimes due to the way it's been kept in the intervening years. Pictures of Pendennis Castle passing at sea are very dark, as you will see, but I judged worth including nonetheless. So if you're ready, let's watch these beautiful liners. We now come to our first ship. Arundel Castle is seen here in Southampton from the decks of Suez. She was launched in 1919 and originally had 4 funnels. At that stage she was 19,000 tons. In 1937 she had a general refit at her builders Holland and Wolff, and 2 of the funnels were removed, but only 2 years later in 1939 she became a troop transport. She remained in government service until 1949. After a refit she came back into service in 1950 and was scrapped in 1959. The Athlone Castle was built by Holland and Wolff in Belfast. She was 25,500 tons, and she was launched in 1935 and completed in May 1936 when she undertook her maiden voyage between Southampton and Cape Town. These pictures in black and white, taken before the war, show her anchored off Madeira. In 1939 she was taken up as a troop transport and released in 1946 and overhauled. She re-entered the Southampton to Cape Town service in 1947, and we see her here in colour on one of those voyages. After the war, the ship would have been fitted with a rudimentary radar system, but the crow's nest was still used from time to time, as was swinging the lead to measure the depth of the sea. Full steam ahead. During the passage, the crew exercised a lifeboat drill, commonly called Board of Trade Sports. I believe this is the captain off duty. And there we leave Athlone Castle. Braemar Castle was launched in 1952 and made her maiden voyage in November of that year. She was used on the round Africa voyages from London. She was broken up in Faslane in 1966. Larger than both the Stirling Castle and the Athlone Castle, 27,000 tons. Cape Town Castle was launched in 1937 and completed in 1938 when she made her maiden voyage from Southampton to Cape Town. Like her smaller sisters, she was taken up for trooping in 1939 and not released until 1946. She was then overhauled at Harland and Wolff, her builders in Belfast, and returned to passenger service in 1947. We can see her here on one of those journeys from South Africa back to London. One of the officers shows that he is not such a dab hand on the greasy pole during the aquatic sports. Such activity was all part and parcel of the outdoor entertainment on the trip home, as indeed was the crossing the line ceremony, which we will see next. These ceremonies in the Union Castle were organised in a much better way than the haphazard way we treated it in the Orient Line, but the results were much the same. Everybody got rather wet. We leave Cape Town Castle berthed in Southampton. The Durban Castle of 17,400 tons was launched in 1938, completed later that year, and indeed she made her maiden voyage to Cape Town in the same year. In 1940 she was taken up as a troop transport and used as a landing ship during the later part of the war. She re-entered service in 1947 and was used by the Union Castle on their round Africa voyages. We can see her here in rather rough weather. She ended her time being broken up in Hamburg in 1962. Edinburgh Castle, built by Harland and Wolff in 1947, was a sister to the Pretoria Castle. He was 28,700 tons. We see her first in Southampton docks, and then in some rather rough weather, followed by some shots around her decks in rather calmer circumstances. During the period of the 50s, 60s and 70s, most of the passenger liners anchored offshore in Madeira. Traders would come out in their boats and sell their wares to the passengers on the decks above. Children would encourage the passengers to throw them coins and then would dive for them. Some of the privileged traders set up a shop on the ship. You see here a member of the nursing staff who clearly caught the eye of the cameraman. Here one of the female officers is being shown how the log works. And the deck officers pretend to take the noonday sights, but I think you'll find their sextants are upside down. The officers take on the passengers at deck cricket. And more sport, this time Board of Trade sports, as explained earlier. On this occasion, a number of the boats are lowered in port and the crew are able to practice. These pictures of Edinburgh Castle were taken in Southampton as she prepares to leave for another voyage to Cape Town. The last of the cargo is being loaded. And soon it's time for the passengers to embark. Some will be going to South Africa to live, others will be just travelling there as tourists, and some are doing the round voyage. Baggage is hoisted aboard along with the remaining stores. The passengers wave to their friends ashore. And a tug pulls her slowly out to start her journey from London to Durban via Cape Town. In 1967, Edinburgh Castle was refitted and modernised. She continued then on the Southampton to Durban voyages until 1976, when in March she made her last voyage. She was sold to Far East Interest and was broken up in Kaohsiung in June of that year. We pick up Kenya Castle in the London docks as she prepares to go on a round Africa voyage. Kenya Castle was built by Holland and Wolff and launched in 1951, and she completed her first voyage around Africa in May of 1952. A senior deck officer. This was clearly a winter sailing, and you can see that the passengers are well wrapped up on the first few days at sea. There are a few shots here around the ship. In 1967, Kenya Castle was laid up on the River Blackwater, and she was sold to the Chandras group and registered as Americanus. She spent the rest of her life as a Chandras ship, sailing initially from Paris to New York and then used mainly for cruising. The turbine steamer Pendennis Castle, built for the Union Castle line by Holland and Wolff, was 28,590 tons. She was due to be launched on the 10th of December 1957. In fact, she was named, but the launching had to be postponed because of a strike. She wasn't in fact launched until the 24th of December, some 14 days late. These rather dark shots of her were taken at sea as she passed another Union Castle liner. It's a great pity because these would have made absolutely wonderful shots, but sometimes the condition of the film is rather poor after being stored for a long time, and sometimes it's because the sun was in the wrong place when the pictures were taken. Pendennis Castle was sold in 1976 to Ocean Queen Navigation Corporation, Panama, and renamed Ocean Queen. Pretoria Castle was a sister to the Edinburgh Castle. She was 28,700 tons and launched in 1947, completed in 1948 when she made her first voyage from Southampton to Durban. In 1966 she was sold to the South African Marine Corps and renamed Orangi, and we shall see her later in that guise. Here she's seen passing at sea. Here we see her in Cape Town. And then some more shots of her passing at sea taken from another Union Castle liner. Pretoria Castle continued on the South Africa to London service until 1975, when she was broken up in Kaohsiung. The Reina Del Mar was also built in Harland and Wolff yards at Belfast. She was 20,234,000 tons, but she was built for Pacific Steam Navigation Company, and she made her maiden voyage in 1956 from Liverpool to Valparaiso. In 1963 she was chartered to the Travel Savings Association, and then in 1964, in March, she was rebuilt as a cruise liner. On June the 10th that year, she made her first voyage to New York for the Travel Savings Association, the ship now under the management of the Union Castle Line. In November of 1964, she was painted in Union Castle Line colours, and she was used solely for cruising from Southampton in the summer and from Cape Town in the English winter. We see her here on a cruise from Southampton. It's those dreaded Board of Trade sports again. This time the passengers are involved at the beginning of their cruise. All aboard for the Skylark. Surely they're not going to make the passengers get into a boat. No, fortunately those sort of antics were kept only for emergencies, and these didn't happen on Reina Del Mar. It was only the crew that exercised the boats, and then only in port. There's a constant need for maintenance, both in port and at sea. Union Castle ships carried a small band, and a lot of the entertainment inboard was done by the purser's staff and others. When it came to outside entertaining, the deck department also helped with these activities. On this occasion, the captain is joining in and seems to be having a good time. During the cruise, the passengers will get the opportunity to visit the bridge. Arrival in Lisbon. We get a good view of how distance is measured by the log. On warm and sunny days, lunch could be taken at the buffet on deck. It wasn't all plain sailing, and sometimes the seas could be a little rough. ship in the foreground is the US ship Constitution. Dolphins, and in warmer climes flying fish, could often be seen from the ship. These are more rare occurrences nowadays. The ship's last call was at Madeira, where you can buy a lot of cane furniture, and obviously the passengers had taken advantage of this. And it was stacked on the after deck along with their luggage as the ship neared Southampton at the end of the cruise. Baggage was taken off and stores were being loaded for the next cruise. In 1973, the Pacific Steam Navigation Company eventually got around to selling the Reina del Mar to the Union Castle line. 2 years later, she arrived at Kaohsiung to be broken up. Stirling Castle, a sister to the Athlone Castle, was launched in 1935 and completed in 1936. From 1940 to 1946 she served as a troop transport and then returned to the Southampton to Cape Town run in 1947. She was broken up in 1966. Transvaal Castle was to be the last of the Union Castle liners. She was built by Brown on Clydebank and was 32,697 tons. She was launched in 1961 and completed in 1962 when she made her maiden voyage from Southampton to Durban. In 1966 she was transferred to the South African Marine Corps and renamed the Vaal. She continued on the same service and under the British flag, but in 1969 she was registered at Cape Town. In 1977 she was withdrawn from service. The first pictures show her leaving Southampton on one of her long voyages, and later we see her in Cape Town. These are also rather dark pictures, but nevertheless they seem to be well worth including. Warwick Castle started her life as Pretoria Castle. During the war, she served as an armed merchant cruiser and was converted to an auxiliary aircraft carrier. After the war, she was renamed Warwick Castle. Winchester Castle was launched in 1929 and was used on the Southampton to Cape Town run. From 1940, she was used as a troop transport and returned to service in 1948. She was scrapped in 1960. Built by Camel Laird and Company in Birkenhead, the Windsor Castle was launched in 1959 and made her maiden voyage from Southampton to Durban in 1960. She was the largest of Union Castle's fleet at 37,640 tons. She stayed in service until 1977 when she was withdrawn. Pictures in this sequence show her initially in Cape Town, and then we see her laying off the harbour at Funchal in Madeira. The last shots of her here are in Cape Town. Launched in 1947 as Pretoria Castle, this ship was sold to the South African Marine Corps and renamed Orange in 1966 and continued in the same service. In 1967 she had a refit, and in 1969 she was registered in Cape Town. She continued on that service until 1975, when she arrived in Kaohsiung to be broken up. We see her here on one of her many voyages leaving Southampton. The second ship that the Union Castle sold to the South African Marine Corps was the Transvaal Castle. She had been launched in 1961, but in 1966 she was transferred and renamed S.A. Vaal, and she continued in the same service under the British flag. In 1969 she was registered in Cape Town, and she served until 1977, when she was withdrawn from service. We can watch her here as she gets ready to depart from Southampton and is eventually pulled out into the harbour. Alexander tugs get ready to take up the ropes. They will pull her away from the wharf, and her main engines will then take her on her voyage to South Africa. We can watch now as she's pulled out into the mainstream. all of these Union Castle ships had lovely lines. They're not only sadly missed by all those who had the lucky chance to sail in them, either as crew members or passengers, but also by ship lovers throughout the world. Just to round this film off, we're now going to have a look at two of Union Castle's passenger cargo ships. The first is the Roallan Castle, one of three: Richmond Castle, Roallan Castle and Roxburgh Castle. We then see the Good Hope Castle, which, with her sister Southampton Castle, was both more powerful and faster than the passenger liners on the mail run. And that will bring an end to our film on the Union Castle line, and I'd like to thank all those who've contributed film, and in particular Peter Leister, who helped me identify the cargo ships at the end.